All right, let's talk about some of the glands that are part of the integumentary system. We've talked about one already, kind of in a roundabout way. These are the sebaceous glands. These are associated with hair follicles. So here's the hair follicle, here's the sebaceous gland here. They are simple acinar glands with a apocrine type secretion. They vary somewhat in size. The largest ones are on our face, neck, and upper chest. What the sebaceous glands secrete is a material called sebum. This is a very oily substance. It's composed of lipids and cell debris, the apocrine type of secretion. It also contains some proteins and salts. Now, what happens here is that the gland is down here in the dermis. It secretes the sebum into the hair follicle onto the hair shaft. And then this material being oil, you know how oil kind of spreads out and gets away from you. The oil will kind of travel up the shaft and spread out across the surface of the skin, spread out across the epidermis. So oil tends to spread, you know, think about the last time you left butter sitting out. Okay, so the function of the sebum is to soften the hair shaft and the stratum corneum. It keeps these structures supple, flexible, and mildly waterproof. Because it is oil, and oil and water don't mix. So it comes up the hair shaft. These dry, flaky, keratinized cells will be made softer and more flexible, more supple by the oils in the sebum. It spreads out across the epidermis, keeps that dry, cornified, keratinized tissue, dead tissue, supple, flexible, and a little bit waterproof. Sebum also contains a few mildly antibacterial substances. So another function of sebum is to at least slow down or inhibit the growth of bacteria on your skin. it's not antibiotics, it's not antiseptic, but it will kind of slow things down so you don't have big fuzzy colonies of bacteria growing all over your skin, even between showers. Secretion of sebum is controlled by hormones. In particular, testosterone. During childhood, before puberty, these glands are not very active. They have a very low level of activity. But their production of sebum will increase dramatically when the person goes through puberty. If the access, or if the duct of the sebaceous gland becomes blocked by cell debris or by bacteria, and the sebum can't move out of the sebaceous gland, it will build up inside the gland and cause swelling of the gland and inflammation of the gland. And this is what we call pimples. White blood cells may be drawn to the area by the bacteria, and now you get pus formation, gives you whiteheads, acne, red swelling, inflammation. That's the sebaceous glands. If the sebum can't get out, it's going to build up inside. And you might remember from your teenage years where you got the pimples: face, neck, upper chest, because that's where you've got the biggest and most active sebaceous gland. Something to add, or? These glands, sebaceous glands, don't have pores. The ones that do have pores are the sweat glands, which was what I was going to say next. So you got me into that real quickly, real nicely. Thank you. Sweat glands, also called the sudoriferous glands. Because in Latin, sudor is the word for sweat. So in Latin, it's sweat glands. In Spanish, too. Someone told me that. Because, of course, Spanish is a Romance language. It is derived almost directly from Latin. These are distributed over most of the skin. We don't find any of these at the nipples and the external genitalia. We don't, yeah. So most areas of our skin have these sweat glands, except for the nipples and the external genitalia. They're kind of the exception to that. It's estimated that the average adult has around 2.5 million sweat glands. That's a lot of sweat glands. Now, there's actually two types of sweat glands. There are what are called the eccrine sweat glands. These are the most common kind. Okay? These are simple coiled tubular glands with a merocrine secretion, meaning they really just produce a liquid. They're most abundant, well, you guys know where you sweat from, on the forehead, the palms of the hands, and the soles of the feet. these are the ones that open directly onto the skin, so they have pores in the skin. The duct of the sweat gland opens directly onto the skin through a pore. The secretion that they produce is called the sweat. This is a hypotonic solution, meaning it's mostly water. It's about 99% water. The other 1% is a combination of salts, in particular sodium chloride. You know sweat tastes salty. Ascorbic acid. Anybody here take nutrition yet?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember ascorbic acid?
Nope.
Nope.
Kind of dumb.
All right. Ascorbic acid is the other name for vitamin C. So if you're taking your vitamins in the morning, you're probably sweating out some of that vitamin C by late in the afternoon. Urea, uric acid, ammonia. Now, the human body doesn't really produce very large amounts of ammonia, so this is very much of a trace of ammonia. There isn't going to be much there. Lactic acid. According to one book I was reading, the lactic acid is what mosquitoes home in on. Living here in Florida, I think we all know that you attract more mosquitoes when you're sweaty than when you're dry. And according to the book, though, it's the lactic acid in the sweat that the mosquitoes can smell and zoom in on. Everybody in Florida's got their own opinion about that, but I'm just telling you that's what the book said. Okay. And something called dermacidin. Which is like the sebaceous glands, antibacterial. So like the sebum, sweat will slow down, inhibit the growth of bacteria on your skin. For most people, the sweat is acidic with a pH that ranges between 4 to 6. This varies a lot, even in the same person, depending on their level of activity, their nutrition. The pH of their sweat may shift depending on their physiology at the moment. Other stuff can show up in a person's sweat. Certain other compounds may end up being secreted in their sweat, depending on the person's genetics, depending on their diet. Some drugs will end up in a person's sweat. I've always thought that this is probably what gives elderly people their distinctive body odor, is that they're all taking so many medications that some of this is coming out in their sweat. So the blood pressure medication and the heart medication and the anticoagulant medication and the antidepressants and the anti-arthritics and the list goes on, painkillers and muscle relaxants and anti-inflammatories, and it's going to give them their sweat kind of a peculiar smell. And certain aromatic compounds in our food. Some people swear they can smell coffee on other people's sweat. I can't, but some people say they can. I can tell you that spicier, more pungent things will show up. Many years ago, I was working with a guy from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, somewhere in that area. He ate curry almost every day. Curry and curry spices were a big part of their diet in his family. And despite the fact that he was very clean, he showered every day, shampooed, wore fresh clothing, you could smell it on him. Those peppers, those aromatics were just coming out through his skin with his sweat. Garlic will give a person a kind of a garlicky odor to their sweat if you're taking garlic supplements for whatever reason. I don't know what people do there. If you're taking fish oil capsules, your sweat may take on kind of a fishy smell. Okay, all right. I thought you had something to say about fish oil capsules and people who eat too many sardines. Okay. Now, what controls the secretion is essentially the autonomic part of the nervous system. Autonomic, there we go. Nervous system. The involuntary parts of our nervous system. The parts that are not under conscious control. So you can't consciously control your sweating. It's a subconscious, involuntary part that is controlled by our nervous system. This is typically triggered by increased body temperature. So you sweat when your body temperature goes up, you sweat when you're hot, and through emotions. In particular, anxiety, embarrassment, okay, I'm not going to worry about spelling that whole thing out, and fear. You're anxious because you got a test coming up. You're going to sweat a little bit more than normal. You slip and fall out in the hallway and everybody sees you and starts to laugh. You're embarrassed and you start to sweat. You're walking across the parking lot with the pirates and the rapists, and you're going to start to sweat. So increased sweating due to either increased body temperature or certain strong emotions. A person will produce some sweat, however, even when they're calm, even when they're cool, even when they're not very physically active. Some sweat is produced almost all the time. And it's thought that the average person is putting out around 600 milliliters of sweat per day. Bless you. I can see by the way you guys are looking at me and just kind of slumped there in your chairs that if I try to push this any further, we're not going to get much productive done. So we'll stop here.